What happens when a golf course owner disguises himself as a groundskeeper and realizes his crew is being pushed past their limits? Forrester stood in the middle of his office, staring at a report he'd read 3 times. 9 courses under the company name, all inherited from his father 3 years ago. Profits were healthy, customer feedback mostly solid except for one place, the West Ridge course in Oregon. Too slow, unkept greens, staff looks miserable. It was the only property where negative reviews kept stacking up. Riley had never visited it in person. His dad had bought it during a final expansion push, and it ended up being the farthest one from corporate. He relied on updates from district managers, but something didn't sit right, so he decided to disappear for a week. He grew out his beard, trimmed it rough, and borrowed maintenance gear from HQ to blend in. The staff at West Ridge had never met him, not once. And with a different crew and manager than the rest, he'd be just another new guy. "Name's Rick," he told the hiring manager over the phone. "Worked greenskeeping in Idaho, moved out here with my cousin." A day later, he showed up for his first shift. The course was quiet, the sky gray, dew still clinging to the blades. A wiry man in his 50s with sun-worn skin and a coffee thermos under one arm waved him over near the maintenance shed. "You're the new guy?" the man asked, barely glancing up. "Yeah, Rick, I'm Nolan, I run the place." "Don't need much talking, just keep up." Riley nodded. Nolan's voice was sharp, impatient. Already something felt off. There was no orientation, no walkthrough, just a rake thrown into his hands and a barked command to start clearing the bunkers. By 7:30, Riley had already been moving nonstop for 2 hours. The rest of the crew, 5 in total, looked just as worn. There was Jackson, a quiet, early-20s guy with sunburned arms. Then there was Jorge, who looked about 50 but moved like he was 80. A tall girl named Jenna hauled fertilizer like it weighed nothing but had deep bags under her eyes. No one talked much. They just kept working. At 9, Nolan came out again. "Break's over in 10, he barked. Riley blinked. "Break? You didn't take one?" Jenna asked him quietly, crouched beside a mower. "No, didn't know we had one." Jenna gave a tired laugh. "We don't, unless you sneak it." By noon, Riley's shirt was soaked through. He spotted Nolan yelling at Jackson near the putting green. "You call this trimmed? I could have done this with a butter knife," Nolan snapped. Jackson kept his eyes down. "Sorry, I'll redo it." Riley clenched his jaw. He wanted to say something but held back. He was here to observe, not yet. By the end of the day, Jorge collapsed on a bench out back and coughed into his sleeve. Nolan walked by and slapped the bench. "Don't get comfortable. I need you back at 5 tomorrow. Got a wedding party playing early." Jorge didn't respond. He just stared at the ground. Riley sat beside him. "You all right?" "I'm fine," Jorge muttered. "Just tired." "How long you been doing this?" 7 years, since the last manager. It wasn't like this before. Before Nolan, Jorge nodded. "He asks more every month, doesn't hire anyone new, says we cost too much." Riley's chest tightened. That explained the short crew. Just 5 people running an 18-hole course. That night, Riley sat in a cheap motel room checking payroll records on his laptop. Jenna, Jackson, Jorge, they were all clocking 6-day weeks, 10-hour shifts, no overtime pay, no backup hires. Nolan reported stable staffing every month. Riley leaned back on the creaky bed and stared at the ceiling. He thought about his father, who always said, "The grass is only as good as the hands that care for it." Riley had forgotten that. He wasn't angry. Not yet. But something was very, very wrong at West Ridge, and by the end of the week, he planned to fix it. Riley arrived before dawn the next morning, his boots crunching against the gravel in the still dark maintenance lot. The chill hung in the air, and condensation clung to the windows of the shed. Jorge was already outside, struggling to lift a leaf blower into the back of a utility cart. "You need a hand?" Riley asked. Jorge gave a slight nod and stepped aside. "I'll take the mower today. I can't feel my right shoulder." They loaded the rest in silence. No one else had shown up yet. The shed lights flickered as an ancient breaker struggled to provide power. Riley noticed a slow drip from a cracked pipe overhead, pooling near a stack of fertilizer bags. The whole building smelled of diesel and mildew. By 6:30, Jenna and Jackson joined them. Jenna's right wrist was wrapped in what looked like a reused bandage. "You okay?" Riley asked. "It's fine," she said. "Just tendinitis, I'll deal." "No one's giving you time off for that," she arched an eyebrow. "Time off means someone else has to do your job." "We both know that's not happening." They loaded up their gear and headed out. Riley was assigned to greens mowing. He'd never done it before, but Jackson offered a crash course as they rode out on the cart. "You don't want to scalp it," Jackson said, adjusting the lever. "Set the reel too low and you'll burn the grass. Too high and the ball won't roll clean." "Got it," Riley said, focusing. "How long have you been doing this?" "This is my 3rd season. I was supposed to get promoted to assistant super last year." Nolan said I needed more maturity. Then he hired his nephew for the spot. Riley kept his eyes on the greens ahead, but his hands tightened around the wheel. They reached hole 5, a par 3 surrounded by dense pine trees. The green there was patchy, with visible brown spots near the edge. "What happened here?" Jackson hesitated. "Nolan cut the watering schedule 2 weeks ago, said the bill was too high, even if it kills the turf." He said aesthetics don't pay the bills. "Tee times do." Riley watched Jackson guide the mower in clean arcs, careful and practiced. The kid clearly cared, but it was obvious he'd stopped expecting recognition. By mid-morning, the sun broke through the clouds and the course filled with golfers. Riley worked the edge of the fairway near hole 8 when he spotted Nolan riding toward him on a cart. "Hey, new guy," Nolan called. "You missed the side patch by the bunker." "I followed the cut line Jackson showed me." "I'm not paying you to follow him. I'm paying you to use your brain." Riley said nothing. Nolan leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I don't care where you came from. You keep up or you're out." "Got it?" Riley held his stare. "Understood." Nolan peeled off without waiting for a response. After lunch raw, 15 minutes grabbed behind the shed, Riley was back on rake duty. He passed Jorge dragging a heavy hose near the practice green. The man was moving slower than this morning, his back hunched, face pale. "I'll take it," Riley said, grabbing the hose. Jorge didn't argue. As Riley coiled it, he noticed the irrigation control box blinking red. He popped it open. The digital panel displayed a warning, "Valve Fault Zone 3." He flagged down Jenna, who was refilling sand bottles nearby. "Does Nolan know the irrigation box is throwing errors?" "He knows. He said it's a low-risk failure, told us to skip that zone and focus on the front 9, skipping an entire zone." "Yup." That's where the dead patches started. Riley closed the box, the weight of it all pressing down. Deferred maintenance, understaffing, medical issues ignored, and a manager who seemed more interested in controlling than leading. Just before 3, a private group arrived, 6 carts, luxury bags, branded shirts. One of them, a tall man in aviators, approached Nolan near the clubhouse. "Course looks rough," the man said. "We're in a transition period," Nolan replied smoothly. "New crew, seasonal turnover." "It'll bounce back." The man raised an eyebrow. "Charging us full rate for transition, though," Nolan forced a laugh. "We'll throw in a few free buckets at the range." Riley watched the exchange from a distance. He didn't miss the way Nolan turned and waved toward the fairway, signaling the crew to pick up the pace. By 5, Riley's arms ached. He sat on a cinder block behind the shed, drinking water from a shared plastic jug. Jackson joined him, pulling off his gloves. "I heard you stood up to Nolan earlier," Jackson said. "Just asked a question." "That's more than most do. He's got people scared." A door slammed behind them. Nolan stepped out of the office and looked around. "Jackson, cart barn's filthy." "You staying late?" "I cleaned it yesterday. You're cleaning it again." Jackson didn't argue. He stood and walked toward the barn. Riley stood too. "Why him?" Nolan turned slowly. "Because I said so. You want to join him?" "No," Riley said. "But I'll ask again, why single him out?" "You'd better watch that tone," Nolan said. "You're lucky to have this job." Riley stepped closer. "Are we?" Nolan stared at him, expression unreadable for a moment, then scoffed and walked away. That evening, Riley called his executive assistant from the motel. He kept his voice low. "I need you to pull Nolan's personnel file," he said. "And the last 12 months of supply orders, payroll data, and field maintenance reports. Send them confidentially." "Don't log them in the shared folder. You okay?" she asked. "I will be, but this place isn't." The next morning, Riley arrived early again. This time he went straight to the back office before anyone else arrived. The door was unlocked. He stepped inside. The office was cluttered with invoices, old scorecards, and a whiteboard covered in scribbled notes. On the desk sat a file labeled Crew Scheduling Weekly. He flipped through it. Double shifts, overlapping days, no rest days for Jorge or Jenna in over 2 weeks. The computer was still on. Riley clicked into the maintenance software. Expense reports were light, almost suspiciously so. Either they weren't ordering what they needed or someone was doctoring the numbers. He heard footsteps approaching and quickly stepped back into the hallway. Nolan entered, holding a cup of coffee. He paused when he saw Riley there. "Something you need?" "Yeah," Riley said. "I need to understand why this course is being run into the ground." Nolan raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? I've been here 3 days, your crew's exhausted, essential systems are failing. And you've been falsifying reports. You're way out of line." "No, I'm not." Riley pulled out his wallet and produced his real ID. "Nolan Morris, I'm Riley Forrester. I own this course. My last name's on the trucks." Nolan's face went pale. "I've seen how you treat people. I've seen how you lie to cover your tracks. You're done here. You can't, you're terminated. Effective immediately. HR will be in touch." Nolan opened his mouth, but Riley had already turned and walked out. He found the crew gathered near the carts, waiting for assignments. He took a breath. "My name's not Rick, it's Riley Forrester. I own this company." Jenna's eyes widened. Jorge looked stunned. Jackson dropped the wrench he was holding. "I went undercover because I needed to see what was really happening here. And what I saw was unacceptable." He paused, letting the silence settle. "Nolan's been fired. Effective now. We're bringing in a temporary manager until we find the right person permanently. You'll all be part of that process." No one spoke. Jenna blinked hard, her expression unreadable. "Starting today, we're hiring 2 more full-time workers and rotating shifts properly. Medical leave will be respected. Pay will be reviewed. And we're bringing in a turf specialist to fix the irrigation system by next week." Jackson stepped forward. "You serious?" "Yes. And I want each of you to meet with me one-on-one. I need to understand what you need to do your job right." Jorge looked down, then back up. "What about us? Do we still have jobs?" "You're not the problem," Riley said. "You're the reason this place held together at all." He looked around at the worn faces, the long, suffering eyes, the quiet resilience. "You deserved better, and now you're going to get it." For the first time that week, no one touched a rake or mower before sunrise. The crew stood in a quiet semicircle near the edge of the maintenance shed, still in their work clothes, unsure what to expect. Riley had called for a morning meeting, and though no one said it, the absence of Nolan's barked orders was a relief none of them knew how to process just yet. Riley didn't stand apart. He kept his gear on, boots still dusted from the previous day. A clipboard hung from his hand, but he wasn't looking at it. "We're not doing regular maintenance today," he began. "We'll finish only the essentials: greens, tee boxes, cart paths. The rest can wait." Jenna shifted her weight slightly. "What about the morning groups? There's a company tournament booked at 9. They'll play, but they'll play the course as it is. No more sprinting to cover things we don't have the hands for." Jackson glanced at Jorge, who gave the smallest nod. Riley looked around at them one by one. "I want to talk with each of you today, not just about the job, about what's actually needed here. You've been carrying this alone for too long." No one interrupted. The silence wasn't resistance, it was caution. They weren't used to being heard. By 8, carts were rolling out, but the pace was manageable. Riley worked alongside Jackson on front 9 greens, not saying much at first. The wind had picked up slightly, stirring pine needles across the fairways. "You ever plan to come back here after this?" Jackson asked suddenly. "After today?" "Yeah, or is this just a one-time drop-in?" "I'll be back," Riley said, "but not as a surprise next time." Jackson hesitated. "You know, I almost walked off last month. I was this close." "What stopped you?" "My mom. She's sick. I'm helping her with rent. I can't afford to gamble on finding something else." Riley didn't respond right away. He adjusted the mower height on the next green, then looked up. "You shouldn't have had to make that trade." They worked in silence for a while after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Later, he found Jenna behind the pump house, checking the fertilizer sprayer's pressure tank. She was kneeling, wrist brace tucked beneath her sleeve, eyes narrowed at a leaking valve. "You're good with equipment," Riley said. She didn't look up. "I had to be. No one else here knows how to keep this thing running since the last tech quit." "Why didn't you tell anyone it was failing?" "I did. Twice. Then Nolan told me to make it work or don't use it." "You're not just a crew member," Riley said. "You're filling a tech role." She stood slowly, wiping her hands. "Everyone here's doing two jobs. We just stopped calling it that." Riley leaned against the wall, watching the leak drip steadily onto the concrete. "What do you want to do here, Jenna?" "Not survive. What do you actually want?" "I want to be treated like I know what I'm doing. I want a training budget, safety gear that isn't expired, and maybe a damn lunch break." He nodded. "We'll start with that. And we'll list everything else you need before the week's out." Back at the shed, Riley reviewed the logbook and found something that hadn't come up before. A name Miguel crossed out on the roster from 3 months ago, no termination date listed, no explanation. He asked Jorge about it as they refilled fuel cans behind the barn. "Miguel?" Jorge's brow furrowed. "He was Nalan's nephew, worked here maybe 10 weeks, didn't do much." "Why did he leave?" "He didn't. He just stopped showing up." "Still on payroll for 2 more months after that." Riley didn't reply. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to his assistant. "Audit every payroll record for West Ridge in the past 12 months. Cross-check hours worked with names on site." He kept his tone even, but inside he felt a slow burn rising. By early afternoon, he sat in the temporary trailer they'd set up near the clubhouse. A small folding table, a few chairs, and a laptop. Jenna was first, then Jackson, then Jorge. Each brought something different: broken tools, safety concerns, requests for proper boots or replacement gloves. None of it was extravagant. Just what they needed to do their job without being worn down. He took notes. Every word. By the time the last meeting ended, the sun was dipping low. Riley stepped outside and watched the last foursome of the day tee off at hole 1, their laughter echoing faintly across the grass. He didn't hear the knock at first. It came again, louder. He turned. A woman stood at the trailer door, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You're the owner?" "I am," named Sarah. "I run tournaments for the region. Nolan used to handle our bookings. He's no longer with us." "I heard. That's why I'm here." She stepped inside without being asked. "Last season, my players left this course with complaints every time. Slow play, rude staff, broken facilities. Nolan blamed the crew, said they were lazy. They're not." "I figured. I've worked with enough courses to know when something smells off. I kept coming back because this location's good for logistics." "But I was about to pull the plug." Riley sat across from her. "You won't need to. I'll believe it when I see it." She paused, pulling a folded sheet from her bag. "Here's my schedule for the next 3 months. If I don't see actual improvement by the end of this quarter, we're pulling future events." Riley took it. "Fair." As she turned to leave, she glanced at the crew working in the distance. "They don't look lazy. They look like they've been surviving." "They have," Riley said. "That ends now." By dusk, Riley walked the course with nothing but a notepad in hand. No mower, no cart, just walking. He paused at the far edge of the back 9 where the tree line thickened and the grass was longer. A rusted bench sat near the path, half hidden under moss and pine needles. It hadn't been touched in months. He sat. The wind moved through the trees slowly. A few birds called out from the canopy. In the distance, he heard the faint engine of a mower winding to a stop. He hadn't planned to be here this long. Originally, he thought 2 days would be enough. But now, he understood how deep the cracks ran and how long it would take to rebuild. He didn't need to fix everything at once. But he had to start with the people who'd kept this place running when no one else cared to look. He stood and walked back toward the maintenance shed where the crew was wrapping cables and locking up equipment. No one said much. But they didn't turn away when he approached. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll start recruiting new hires. You'll be part of the interviews. We'll rotate shifts fairly. And we'll rebuild this course together." Jenna looked at the others, then back at him. "You're really doing this? I'm not leaving until it's done." They didn't clap. They didn't cheer. But for the first time, none of them looked like they were waiting for the other boot to drop. And that was enough. 3 weeks later, West Ridge looked the same from a distance, but everything underneath had started to shift. The changes hadn't come easy. The first week after Nolan's removal was controlled chaos. Riley stayed on site, no longer undercover, coordinating directly with regional HR and operations. He brought in a temporary superintendent from the company's flagship course to help manage the transition. Not to run it, just to help stabilize. The crew was still small, and no one pretended otherwise. But now they weren't expected to perform miracles. They were expected to work safely, to be respected, and to speak up. They were still tired, but they were no longer alone. That morning, Riley stepped into the office trailer early, coffee in hand, as a knock came at the door. It was a woman in her 30s, clipboard under her arm, wearing worn hiking boots and a sharp expression. "Katie Ramirez," she said as he opened the door. "You asked me to show up early." "Come in," Riley said. "Thanks for making the drive." Katie was one of 3 candidates for the permanent course superintendent role. She had spent the last 6 years overseeing a municipal course outside of Spokane and had come recommended by someone Riley trusted. She didn't bring a portfolio. She brought field-tested knowledge. As they sat down, she glanced at the whiteboard covered in notes left behind from the week's crew meetings. "You've got your hands full," Katie said. "I do. And you want someone who's okay inheriting a course mid-rebuild with a crew that's been through hell." "Exactly," Katie nodded. "Then don't expect them to trust me right away. They need someone who proves it with consistency, not a speech. That's what I want. Someone who'll earn it. I don't micromanage, but I hold people accountable. Staff, vendors, golfers, everyone. If someone's cutting corners or cutting down morale, I'll handle it. You ready for that?" "That's what we need." "Good. Because if I take this job, I'll run it with my name on it, not just yours." Riley leaned back slightly, considering. Then he reached over and shook her hand. "You're hired." She didn't thank him. She just nodded once and said, "I'll start Monday." Outside, the crew had already begun their morning prep. Riley walked down to the cart barn where Jackson was checking tire pressure with a handheld gauge. His uniform was cleaner than usual, and for the first time, his eyes didn't look sunken. "Morning," Riley said. Jackson screwed the cap back on and stood. "Got the new fuel line in on cart 7. Runs smooth now. Appreciate you handling it." Jackson nodded. "You said you were bringing in someone permanent?" "Yeah, Katie Ramirez. She's sharp." "No nonsense. You think she'll last?" "She's not coming here to test the waters. She already told me she's not here to win people over with charm. She's here to rebuild trust." "That might actually work," Jackson said. "Charm doesn't mean much around here anymore." Riley smiled faintly, then looked past him toward the workshop. The door was open and Jorge was inside, sorting tools. Riley headed in. The shelves were now labeled. The floor was swept. A new bench vise had been installed on the corner table. It was still a humble space, but now it was functional. "Did the new compressor come in?" Riley asked. "Yeah," Jorge said without turning. "Unboxed it last night. I'll install it after I finish organizing the socket sets. You've done a lot in a short time. I like working with my hands. I just needed time to do it right. You've got it now." Jorge paused, then turned and looked Riley in the eye. "I almost quit 3 times, but the others, they're younger. I stayed because someone had to." Riley nodded. I know that now. Down by the pump house, Jenna was kneeling beside the irrigation control unit, a schematic spread out on a crate beside her. A new technician from Regional was walking her through calibration settings, but she was the one holding the tools. Riley waited until they finished, then crouched beside her. "That's the new zone interface," he asked. "Yeah, replace the whole panel. We've got full coverage again. I'm setting the timers to prevent runoff near the slope on hole 9. "You're taking lead on this?" I asked too. "It's what I want to do: long-term irrigation, systems, diagnostics. I'm done hauling fertilizer bags around and pretending that's the only thing I'm good at. You'll have a development plan in place by next week. I'll personally make sure of that." She didn't respond at first. Then she said, "You're not just fixing the course, you're fixing the way people are seen. That's the goal." Near the clubhouse, a group of high school golfers were signing in for a practice round. Riley watched them from the edge of the lot. They were loud, joking, impatient in the way only teenagers could be. But he noticed something else: a moment where one of the players stopped to thank Jackson for setting up the range. Jackson didn't respond with words. He just nodded, but his shoulders straightened slightly. Later that afternoon, Riley sat across from the district finance officer inside the newly cleaned manager's office. The audit was complete. Nalan processed nearly $12,000 in fake payroll last year, the officer said, all tied to ghost hours for 2 employees who weren't actually working. One of them was his nephew. The other's name doesn't match any ID on file. "Charges?" Riley asked. "Already filed. We've locked the system down, no more single-point approvals." "Good, make sure HR follows up with the crew. They need to know justice was done, not just assumed." After the officer left, Riley stepped into the break room. It was still modest: just a table, a coffee pot, and a few chairs, but now it had a stocked mini-fridge, a first aid kit on the wall, and a posted schedule with real breaks. Jenna was sitting there, eating a sandwich in peace. "You staying much longer?" she asked. "I'll be here through the end of the month, just to make sure Katie's transition is smooth." "You trust her?" "I do. She better be ready. This place has been hurt enough. She knows." As Riley walked back toward the course, he paused near hole 4. The green had been re-leveled and reseeded, but a small patch near the back edge still hadn't fully regrown. It would take time. Things didn't heal overnight, but it was growing. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the last cart rolled in, Riley stood beside the shed as the crew packed up. There was no ceremony, no speeches, just a quiet, steady rhythm of people finishing a hard day's work with dignity intact. Jorge walked past him and gave a nod. Jackson tossed his gloves into his locker and closed it without slamming it. Jenna wiped her hands on a towel and didn't look like she was bracing for another long night. Riley looked at them one more time. They weren't smiling, but they were standing differently, and that meant something. He turned toward the path back to the clubhouse, the air quiet except for the soft rustle of the trees. The course wasn't perfect, but it was no longer hidden behind silence and fear. It was honest, and finally, it was his again.